You know, so often what we hold as our truth and what is true can be two very different things. Our stories hold us captive. You know, we could have 5 people in a room experiencing the same exact experience, and they're going to walk away with a different version of what happened in that room. Now, is that because of what they believe about the world or about themselves or about or is it the biases towards different structures of thought such as religion or race? And we claim our version to be true. True, real healing comes when all illusion is stripped away and what's left is truth. Real truth. When we're operating out of fear, we're seeing our circumstance through a pinhole and we miss all the subtleties. Did you know that science says that the human brain takes in 400 billion bits of information every second, and the average person utilizes only 100 bits of all that information? So how much of your life is on autopilot? Now, I want you to understand you're not doing anything wrong. We just have to step out of what we think we already know and turn that road into a treasure hunt for truth. Because in the missing pieces, in the unseen pieces, we often find what we need to gain forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is a word that means something different to everyone. But here I'd like to think of forgiveness as the liberation from guilt and blame. Now, not in any way am I negating personal responsibility for the abusers. But what I know to be true in myself and in my clients is that the blame and the guilt keep us trapped in the hell that they created for us in the first place. And here's the catch. They're long gone, they're living their lives, and we're still trapped sitting in hell. I was working with this beautiful woman. She was in her 70s, and the trauma she endured as a child was just horrendous. She lived in a house with her grandfather, her aunt, her mom, and her sister. And she felt herself to be targeted, but she had no idea why. And she had this deep hatred for her aunt. She had no idea why, really. Even with the mention of her aunt's name, her face would curl up, right, with distaste. But with her willingness to see truth, we quantum jumped back to the cluster of trauma on her timeline. It was like a honeycomb. And through these experiences, she was able to see that there was a lot of missing information in her story. Now, not that information excused her aunt's behavior, but it did give her a basis of understanding and an avenue for compassion. Quantum jumping, astral travel, and disassociation are all the same thing. The first two are actions. Disassociation is a reaction. Now, through the act of quantum jumping, we can traverse time and space, and the connection is so total that a person can literally walk into another place in time. Now, the cool thing about this is that when we jump back, it's not as if you're going back as the child in memory and re-experiencing what you already know. Instead, you're going back to discover new and different information. As a grown-up, as you're going back. Now, for this amazing woman, when she went back, she saw that her aunt had been taken as grandpa's wife. And as a very young child, my client had stumbled into knowing this. She actually stumbled into them being in bed together. Now, the aunt, can you imagine? Because this had become her life. So what came after was a constant punishment for the reminder that this little girl brought every time she entered the room. Now, the good news is that my client was able to hold that little girl, comfort her, explain the truth. And ultimately, she was able to integrate her molecules that had been trapped there back in the reality that she had chosen to live in today. So now when she speaks of her aunt, her face shows compassion versus the earlier disdain and disgust. Now, to be clear and to be true, none of this has to do with liking someone, right? It doesn't. My beloved mentor Deepak Chopra said to me one time, he said, "Cherie, pain happens, but suffering is a choice." I thought my eyeballs were going to pop out of my head, but he asked me, he said, "Cherie, when was the last time that these people actually hurt you?" It had been 40 years. 40 years that I had allowed this experience to define my life. And yes, people do bad things, but when we allow the bad things to be all we can see, and in truth, our version of the bad thing really, right? That bad incident becomes our life and the trajectory for everything else. So I want to leave you with a great little exercise to jumpstart your treasure hunt. Because in this Where's Waldo frame of information, right, I want you to go on a treasure hunt for 3 new and different things in your environment. And at night, before you go to sleep, remind yourself that something new and different showed up. So put your flag in the sand there. And this can quickly turn that habitual thought and the way you'd been utilizing your 100 bits into inspiration and creation.